So now you've created a video in Vidversity. You've put it into Vidversity and you've made a course which has got all these exciting things in it. Well, now what? So we have a number of options. One is you can simply just share the URL. Now part of that is we do require someone to put in their first name, last name and email address, so you can get a little bit of data of who did it, maybe if they completed it, very, very basic data. The other two ways you can deliver is in an LMS using Scorm. So we've got both versions of Scorm, 2004 and 1.2, and that will give you some quite good analytics. So it might be if they got the questions correct, or have they completed it all, depending on whether you've made them go through sequentially, have they done every chapter. And then we also have LTI, and LTI is my favourite because it has a lot more flexibility and data, and it works in LMSs too. It seems to be predominantly education, but it's something I think that all LMSs should really explore. And the reason it's so exciting is every time you update a course, you don't have to republish it. It automatically updates over in your LMS. And you can get quite a lot of data from it. You can get all kinds of when the person stopped and started and what question answers they gave and all that kind of stuff. So it's a whole journey. It's about building the video, and then it's actually creating it into a course, and then it's delivering it in whatever way suits your organisation best. Hi, my name's Natalie Wheeland, and this short course is going to take you through understanding the Australian legal system. So in Australia we have what's called a common law country. So that means we have two components that can make up the law. We can either have law that's made by Parliament, or we can actually have law made by judges. And for people from civil law countries, that's quite a change. It's quite different. So in this course, I'm going to take you through understanding how Parliament works, then I'm going to take you through understanding common law, and then in conclusion look at how the courts and Parliament work together, in that the courts actually interpret what Parliament have passed. Hi, so this chapter is going to look at the role of Parliament in Australia. So here we have a federal system. What that means is we have a Commonwealth Parliament, or a federal Parliament, that umbrellas the whole of our country, and then we have a Parliament in each state. So our laws have been divided into who deals with what, and all that was established in our Constitution. So our Constitution is probably the most important document to help you understand the Australian legal system. So to give you an example, what happened, we previously existed as a series of colonies, and it became really difficult for people to agree on who got what power. So the Constitution set up a list of all the powers that the federal government would have, and anything that wasn't mentioned would remain with the states. And that's different to a lot of countries. Canada did the other way. They said this is what all the states have, and anything left over the federal government have. So it's an interesting thing to be mindful of, that we are a little bit different here. Now in the Constitution it makes it really clear who has that power. So for instance, taxation, Commonwealth. The Army, Defence, Commonwealth. Currency, Commonwealth. It makes good sense. We don't want different currency in each state. But then there's other things that sort of make it very interesting as a country. Road safety, state. So there's different road rules in each of our states. You can get your licence at different ages. So it's 18 in Victoria, but it's 16 in South Australia. So there's different road rules. Education, state, which is an interesting one. It also means we have different education systems in each of our states. So Parliament, we have a Parliament at a federal level, which sits in Canberra, and then we have a Parliament in each state. And they're all made up of two houses of Parliament, an upper house and a lower house. Except Queensland, they don't have an upper house. And here in Australia, we vote for both the upper house and the lower house, but the interesting thing in Australia is it's actually compulsory to vote. So we must vote. And our Prime Minister is decided by the party. So we don't vote for a president, we vote for a member or a representative of a party in our area. And then that person, if they win their seat, they are our representative of that region. And the party that gets the most representatives forms government. And then they choose who the Prime Minister is, which is an interesting concept. So we know in the campaigning who is going to be the Prime Minister, but what is interesting and has really reared its ugly head in the last 10 years is they can keep changing that even without going to the vote. Now, Parliament is where the laws of Australia are made. So Parliament is basically a system whereby a bill is introduced into Parliament, usually in the lower house. It's passed through the separate stages, so it's read for the first time, second time, voted on. The committee stage might make any amendments that people have recommended. Third time it's voted. If it gets a majority vote, it goes over to the upper house. Same process. Once it gets through the upper house, it still requires the royal assent. The royal assent is from the Queen's representative, which is the General, a Governor-General at the Commonwealth level and the Governor at state level. And until it's received the royal assent, it is not actually the law. So that's how Parliament works. It creates our laws of Australia. Now I'm going to look at the roles of the court. Now this is where things get really interesting, because we have a system that if there is no law that's been outlined in the legislation, the courts can still come up with a resolution and actually create law. And I think the most famous case is the case of Donoghue and Stevenson, which was actually in Scotland in the 1930s. The case was heard in the House of Lords in 1932. And in that instance, a lady went out for lunch and she bought herself a ginger beer. And she had a bottle, and the bottle was quite cloudy, so she couldn't see inside. And after she'd been drinking the bottle of ginger beer, she saw at the bottom there was a dead snail in it. Ugh. So she went to her solicitor and said, "It's outrageous, there can't be a snail in my ginger beer." And the solicitor looked at all the laws and legislation and said, "There's nowhere that says that a product that you purchase must be fit for purpose." So they went to the court, and the court established a rule that says a product, when it is made, the manufacturer has a duty of care to the purchaser that it must be fit for purpose. It must be as it says. It must be ginger beer. And then a couple of years later, in Australia, a man by the name of Mr. Grant went out and bought a jumper, and he got really itchy and felt really overwhelmed, discovered there was bugs in his jumper. He ended up suing the Australian knitting mills, and they used the principle from the House of Lords that said, look, there's no legislation, but in that case beforehand, the judges said there has to be a duty of care from the manufacturer, so the Australian knitting mills had to pay compensation. And that's what happens from a case, a set of facts. The judges make a decision, and if another case comes along with a similar set of facts, the judges, if they are in a court below, must follow the higher court. In Australia, our court hierarchy is the highest court in our land is the is the High Court of Australia. The House of Lords, which is now the Supreme Court of the UK, is the highest in the UK, and we no longer have to look at that. The highest court in our land is the High Court of Australia in Canberra.